There is a trap that Sigmund Freud observed capturing almost every human being he encountered. A trap so subtle, so deeply woven into the fabric of human psychology that most people live their entire lives inside it without ever recognizing they're trapped. The trap is this: you believe that being loved will make you feel worthy. You believe that if you can just get enough people to love you, approve of you, validate you, accept you, then you will finally feel like you deserve to exist. So you spend your entire life trying to be loved. You adjust yourself, you perform, you please, you sacrifice, you contort yourself into whatever shape you think will secure love. And the cruel irony, the devastating paradox that Freud understood, is that the more desperately you try to be loved, the more unworthy you feel. Because deep down, you know the truth. They're not loving you. They're loving the performance. They're loving the version of you that you've carefully constructed to be lovable. And as long as you're performing, as long as you're trying to be loved, you can never feel truly worthy. Because worthiness doesn't come from external validation. It comes from something else entirely. This is one of the most important and most painful truths in psychology. You have to stop trying to be loved before you can feel worthy. You have to withdraw from the desperate pursuit of external validation. You have to stop performing and start simply being. You have to risk being rejected as yourself rather than accepted as a carefully managed image. And only then, only when you stop trying, can you discover that your worthiness was never dependent on being loved at all. It was always there. You just couldn't see it because you were too busy chasing validation. Let's start with the fundamental wound that creates this trap. Early in life, you learn that love is conditional. Your parents, no matter how well-intentioned, communicate through countless small interactions that certain parts of you are acceptable and certain parts are not. When you behave in ways they approve of, you receive love, attention, affection. When you behave in ways they don't approve of, you receive withdrawal, criticism, punishment. You learn very quickly that love is something you have to earn, that you have to be a certain way to deserve it, that your worthiness is determined by whether others find you acceptable. This learning happens before you have language, before you have the capacity to question it. It becomes foundational. It becomes the lens through which you understand yourself and your place in the world. You internalize the belief that you are not inherently worthy, that your worth must be proven, that you must continually earn the right to be loved, to be accepted, to exist. And this belief shapes everything that comes after. As you grow up, you carry this belief into every relationship, every social interaction, every achievement you pursue. You're constantly asking, am I lovable? Am I acceptable? Am I worthy? And you're looking to others for the answer. You need them to tell you yes. You need them to validate you. You need them to love you so that you can finally feel like you're enough. But here's what Freud understood. No amount of external love can make you feel worthy if you fundamentally believe you're not. The external validation might feel good temporarily. It might quiet the anxiety for a moment, but it never lasts. Because you know, at some level, that if they really knew you, if they saw the parts you've been hiding, the thoughts you've been suppressing, the desires you've been denying, they wouldn't love you anymore. So you keep performing. You keep trying. You keep adjusting yourself to be more lovable. You become hypervigilant to others' reactions. You read their faces, their tone, their body language, constantly scanning for signs of approval or disapproval. You suppress parts of yourself that might be judged. You emphasize parts that get positive responses. You become a chameleon, shifting your presentation depending on who you're with and what you think they want from you. And all of this requires enormous energy. All of this creates enormous anxiety. Because you're always one mistake away from being exposed. You're always one moment of authenticity away from losing the love you've worked so hard to secure. Think about the person who can't say no, who agrees to everything, takes on everyone's problems, sacrifices their own needs constantly. They tell themselves they're just being kind, just being helpful. But underneath, there's terror. Terror that if they say no, if they prioritize themselves, if they set boundaries, people will stop loving them. And if people stop loving them, they will be worthless. So they say yes, even when it hurts them. They perform kindness even when they're exhausted. They give endlessly, even when they have nothing left. And they feel increasingly resentful, increasingly drained, increasingly empty, because they're not actually being kind. They're desperately trying to secure love through self-sacrifice. They're trying to prove their worthiness by being useful, by being needed, by being indispensable. Or think about the person who is obsessed with achievement, who is always working, always striving, always pursuing the next goal. They tell themselves they're ambitious, they're driven, but underneath, there's desperation. Desperation to finally achieve enough to feel worthy. Desperation to finally be impressive enough that people will love them unconditionally. Desperation to prove through external success that they deserve to exist. But no achievement is ever enough. The promotion doesn't satisfy. The recognition doesn't last. The accomplishment feels hollow because they're not pursuing achievement for its own sake. They're trying to earn worthiness through success. They're trying to buy love with accomplishments. Or think about the person who is constantly accommodating, constantly adjusting, never expressing their actual preferences or needs, who asks, "What do you want to do?" and means it desperately because they have no idea what they actually want, and they're terrified that expressing a preference might lead to rejection, who goes along with everything, agrees with everyone, mirrors whoever they're with. They tell themselves they're easygoing, they're flexible, but underneath, there's panic. Panic that if they show who they actually are, if they express what they actually want, if they stop performing agreeableness, people will see that they're not lovable. So they disappear. They become a reflection of others' desires. They lose themselves completely in the desperate attempt to be loved. Freud saw all of these patterns. He saw people destroying themselves in the pursuit of love. He saw people sacrificing their health, their dreams, their authentic selves, all in the desperate attempt to feel worthy through external validation. And he understood that this pursuit is fundamentally tragic, because it cannot succeed. You cannot earn worthiness through performance. You cannot secure love through self-sacrifice. You cannot prove your value through achievement, because the premise is wrong. The premise is that you're not worthy unless you're loved. And that premise is what keeps you trapped. When you operate from this premise, when you believe that worthiness comes from being loved, you become completely externally controlled. Your emotional state depends entirely on how others respond to you. If someone approves of you, you feel good. If someone criticizes you, you feel crushed. If someone loves you, you feel temporarily secure. If someone withdraws, you panic. You have no stable internal sense of worth. You're entirely dependent on the fluctuating opinions and responses of others. And this dependence creates a life of constant anxiety, constant performance, constant desperation. But here's what Freud discovered in his work. The opposite is also true. When you stop trying to be loved, when you withdraw from the desperate pursuit of external validation, when you stop performing and start simply being yourself, something shifts. The constant anxiety begins to quiet. The desperate need for approval begins to loosen. And in the space where that desperation used to be, something else emerges, a sense of your own worth that doesn't depend on anyone else's opinion. This worthiness doesn't come from achievement or virtue or being good enough. It's not something you earn or prove. It's something you discover was always there. It's the simple fact of your existence. You exist. You are a conscious being having an experience. You have thoughts, feelings, desires, perceptions. You are fundamentally, irreducibly yourself. And that is enough. Not enough to make you special or superior, just enough to give you the right to exist, to take up space, to have needs and wants and preferences. But you can't access this sense of inherent worth while you're desperately trying to be loved. Because the desperate trying comes from the belief that you're not already worthy. It comes from the belief that you have to earn the right to exist through others' approval. And as long as you hold that belief, as long as you're trapped in that paradigm, you cannot experience your inherent worth. You cannot feel the simple sufficiency of your own existence. Stopping the pursuit of love is terrifying, because it means risking rejection. It means showing yourself as you actually are and accepting that some people won't like you. It means setting boundaries and accepting that some people will be disappointed. It means expressing your actual preferences and accepting that some people will disagree. It means being authentic and accepting that authenticity doesn't guarantee love. In fact, authenticity often costs you the conditional love you've been working so hard to maintain. This is the crisis point. that Freud saw people reach in therapy. The moment when they have to choose between continued performance and authenticity, between the desperate pursuit of love and the risk of being themselves. Most people, when they reach this point, retreat back into performance. The fear is too great. The risk feels too dangerous. Better to remain in the familiar anxiety of trying to be loved than to face the unknown territory of simply being yourself. But the few who choose authenticity, who choose to stop trying and simply be, discover something profound. They discover that rejection is not death, that being disliked is not catastrophic, that disapproval doesn't erase your worth. They discover that they can be themselves, that some people will reject them for it, and they survive. More than survive, they begin to feel genuinely worthy for the first time, not because they've achieved something or proven something or earned something, but because they've stopped betraying themselves. They've stopped performing. They've stopped asking permission to exist. They've stopped trying to be loved and started simply being. And here's the beautiful irony that Freud observed. When you stop trying to be loved, you often become more genuinely lovable. Not to everyone, not universally, but to the people who can actually see you and appreciate you for who you are. When you're performing, trying desperately to be loved, you're bland, you're generic, you're whatever you think people want. There's nothing distinctive about you because you've smoothed away all the edges that make you yourself. But when you stop performing, when you simply show up as you are, you become interesting. You become real. You become someone who can be genuinely known rather than just superficially approved of. The love you receive when you're being yourself is qualitatively different from the love you receive when you're performing. When you're performing, the love feels conditional, tentative, always about to be withdrawn if you stop meeting expectations. When you're being yourself, the love feels solid, real, based on actual seeing rather than on managed presentation. And even if you receive less love, even if fewer people love you when you're authentic, the love you do receive actually nourishes you, because it's for you, not for your performance. But more importantly, when you stop trying to be loved, you stop needing love to feel worthy. The desperate craving for validation begins to quiet. You can appreciate love when it comes, enjoy connection when it's offered, but you're no longer dependent on it for your sense of worth. You're no longer performing for it. You're no longer sacrificing yourself to secure it. You're free, free to be yourself, free to make choices based on what you actually want rather than what will get you loved. Free to say no, free to set boundaries, free to express preferences, free to exist. This freedom is what Freud meant by psychological health, not the absence of problems or conflicts or difficulties, but the capacity to be yourself without needing constant external validation, the capacity to feel worthy of existence simply because you exist, the capacity to live from an internal sense of worth rather than being entirely dependent on external approval. Most people never achieve this. Most people spend their entire lives trying to be loved, trying to earn worthiness through others' approval, performing endlessly and feeling increasingly empty. They die having never been themselves. They die having never felt genuinely worthy. They die having spent their entire existence asking others to tell them they deserve to exist. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can choose to stop trying. You can choose to risk being yourself. You can choose authenticity over approval. You can choose to face rejection rather than continue the performance. You can choose to discover your inherent worth rather than continuing the futile attempt to earn it through external validation. This choice is difficult. It requires courage. It requires you to face your deepest fear, the fear that if you stop performing, if you show yourself as you are, no one will love you. It requires you to be willing to lose conditional love in order to discover that your worth was never conditional in the first place. It requires you to trust that being yourself is better than being loved for who you're not. Freud spent his career trying to help people make this choice, trying to help them see that their desperate pursuit of love was keeping them from feeling worthy, trying to help them understand that worthiness is not earned through performance, but discovered through authenticity, trying to help them find the courage to stop trying and simply be. The question is whether you're willing to make this choice, whether you're willing to stop trying to be loved, whether you're willing to risk rejection, Whether you're willing to be authentic even when authenticity costs you approval. Whether you're willing to discover that your worth was never dependent on others' opinions. Whether you're willing to finally feel worthy not because someone loves you, but because you've stopped betraying yourself in the desperate attempt to be loved. When you stop trying to be loved, you finally feel worthy. Not because you've achieved something or proven something, but because you've stopped asking permission to exist. You've stopped performing. You've stopped sacrificing yourself for validation. You've discovered that your worth was always there, inherent, unconditional, simply because you exist. And that discovery, that recognition, that acceptance, that's where freedom begins. That's where life begins. That's where you finally become yourself. This is what Freud knew. This is what he tried to teach. That the desperate pursuit of love keeps you from feeling worthy. That performance prevents authentic connection. That trying to be loved is what makes you feel unlovable. And that when you finally stop trying, when you finally risk being yourself, you discover the worth that was waiting underneath the performance all along. The worth that doesn't need to be earned. The worth that simply is. The worth that makes life worth living.